Hi everybody, Kim here, and welcome to the Wide Awake International podcast. If you've forgotten, because it's been such a very long time, this is a place where I share stories of bringing hope, love, and dignity to our friends with disabilities here in Ukraine. This podcast was an idea that we had last winter. It was something I wanted to do for a really long time, and it was kind of my baby, and we started it. It was going really well, and then Russia invaded Ukraine. I think in our very last episode, we had just said, well, Russia was supposed to invade today, but nothing happened. And then the day we actually published it, we had to add a note in the beginning that Russia did, in fact, attack Ukraine. And it has been a terrorizing war. And the past 7 months have been, the worst of many, many, many people's lives, including ours. But we are safe and we are here in Ukraine. Once the war started, we switched over to YouTube and we're just doing videos because, well, the podcast was never going to happen during that time. And it was just so much easier to just shoot off a video than to sit and try to gather all my super confusing thoughts into a finely edited blog post. Just videos were easier. And then everybody liked it. And then we were refugees in Germany and blah, blah, blah. Now we're back and I have the ability to podcast again and I really wanted to get up and get it going. But I thought I would add the YouTube portion to it too because some people like video and then I'm killing two birds with one stone. So if you want to watch it, here I am. Hi. If you just want to listen, that's fine too. I'm a listener, not a watcher. So I'm with you, podcast crowd. I thought it would be a good idea over the next few episodes to just share what has happened with us and our boys and our team in this past 7 months of war. I think yesterday marked 200 days of war. And as if you just followed us on the podcast, then we totally fell off the radar. And I thought it would be interesting, helpful to share how the war affected us in the beginning and then our time in our time in Germany as refugees, and then now just continuing to share our life now that we're back in Ukraine. And I'm so thankful that we are here again. So starting in the beginning, over last winter, starting in about November, Russia started amassing a massive amount of troops all along the borders of Ukraine. We're a couple hours from the Belarusian border, and it was starting to be a little bit concerning, but we thought, it's just politics, it's just for show, nothing's probably going to happen. Actually, Jed in November was in Germany, and he was going to buy a car there. It's a good idea not to buy cars in Ukraine. A used car that has seen Ukrainian roads has had a hard life. It's better to buy a car that's seen nice German roads. So he was in Germany with our partners there, going to buy a car. And while he was there, the pastor of the church that we partner with was like, hey, we don't like how things are looking with Russia. If the war happens, you guys can come to us. You can live here at the church. We'll take care of you. You can come to us. And I remember Jed telling me that, and we're like, well, thank you. That's so nice. But there's not going to be a war. This is just an act of show, or whatever. In January, tensions really started to ramp up. A lot of people were talking more and more often about what will happen if there's a war. We had a chat group for members of our church, called What If There's a War? And, the pastor just encouraged everybody to have a plan. Many, many, many people from our church left our city and went to the west, thinking that it would be safer there near the Polish border. There was hardly anybody left. And then when that's happening, you're looking around thinking, okay, what are we missing? Everybody's leaving, but we're staying. But with our boys, the thought of leaving, it sounded impossible. There's no way we were going to leave just in case. We were only going to leave if we really had to, because taking them anywhere is a huge event, and fleeing just in case, we just weren't going to be doing that. So we thought this is all going to be political. Russians aren't going to hurt Ukrainians. We'll just prepare, just in case, and we'll just plan to hunker down. We don't live in the village. We don't live in the city. Our homestead is out in the village. So it seemed safe enough here, but it really was starting to feel tense. February 16th, there were rumors that Russia was going to invade that day. And actually, that's the day we recorded our last podcast. And nothing happened. But that day, we really decided, the tensions were so high. We decided, we need to nail down a few more details just in case something really does happen. So we bought kilos and kilos of potatoes, carrots, beets, onions, tons of cooking oil, rice, buckwheat, like just all the staples in case everybody from our team just needed to hunker down here at the homestead. We filled up all the cars with diesel. Ruslan, our logistics manager, had been stockpiling fuel over the past month or so we had a lot in case we needed to get out or in case there was a shortage. We bought 3 generators, 1 for each home. We felt like, okay, we're ready. We also made a plan of evacuation for our friends and our team members that were still in the city. Like, if we lose internet, if we lose cell service, if there's emergency signals within the city, this is the route. Somebody in our team every hour is going to drive this route. And if you, at any time, if you want to come out to the homestead, they will pick you up. Just made that emergency plan. We felt really good. Also, Grant, the American that lives in the duplex here, he was supposed to arrive I think his plane was supposed to arrive the day after the war actually started. But this was still a week before and nothing had happened yet. And so we were making a plan with him. How will he get here if the airspace is closed? Because he still was really, really committed to coming at that point. So, we felt like all of our ducks were in a row. We were ready just to hunker down and wait. I remember February 18th super fondly. That was our last big celebration before the war. It was so carefree and so fun. Our friend Dima was turning 16 and him and his mom, they wanted to celebrate his birthday here. So all the boys were there and we just had so much fun. I look back on those pictures and I'm like, oh, we were so innocent. I mean, there were definitely tensions then, but nothing had happened yet. And it was all still kind of rumors. And that was a really special day that I'll remember. So we went to bed February 23rd in a peaceful yet tense Ukraine and woke up February 24th to war. Around 4:45, 5 in the morning, Jed woke up and he felt like the Lord woke him up and he just felt like the Lord was speaking to him like, Jed, there's going to be explosions. Don't be afraid. I'm with you. Sure enough, about 30 minutes later, I don't remember exactly what time it was, between 5 and 5:30 in the morning, there were huge explosions just to the south of us. And it woke us up and we just, okay, this is happening. You check your phone, you look at the news. It was happening in cities all over the country. Russia had officially invaded. It was so surreal, you guys. It was unbelievable. Even though we knew it had happened and that it could have happened, it just was unreal that it actually did. And I remember a few days before the invasion, Masha from our team was here and it was so tense and we were so tired of it being so tense that she and I had this conversation if this war is going to happen, we wish that it would go ahead and just start because this is so unbearable, the not knowing. Recognizing at that same time that we only said that because we'd never lived through war before. And once it really did happen, you're like, I take it back. I don't actually want this. The tension was better. So once the morning, we just kind of let the kids who slept through it, we just let them sleep, texted our team members. Some people didn't hear it as much in the city because, you're surrounded by buildings. We hear more out here in the village. But once it got a little later, I just texted in the parent chats of our kids' school, hey, I don't think anybody knows what's going on, but I'm not sending my kids to school today. And then the other messages start trickling in one after another. No, I'm not sending my kid. I'm not sending my kid. And that was, the day before the war started, February 23rd, that was the last day that kids in Ukraine went to school. They didn't open up again that school year. We were at war. It was crazy. February 25th, there was a very frequent air raid sirens in our city. There were more explosions. We have moms and their adult sons with disabilities that live in our city. They're a part of our community, part of our wider Wide Awake family. And, you know, they were very afraid. So we convinced them to go ahead and come out here, that they could stay at the duplex altogether. Some family friends from Kyiv, they got out. They came here to stay at the duplex. Team members who were living in the city, they all came. Grant was supposed to arrive that day, February 25th. Like how? I don't know. That was a whole plan in the works. He was still really committed to coming though. February 26th, Kyiv was under heavy attack. They blew out the bridge, the main high bridge on the highway leading from Kyiv towards our city. At that day, a group of about 15 students from a seminary outside of Kyiv, they came to stay at the duplex, and you know, praise God that they got out before the bridge blew up, because their seminary was overrun by Russian soldiers. I mean, you've heard about the atrocities that have happened in villages outside of Kyiv, and we are really thankful that they got out when they did. I think so around that time, there was like 50 to 60 people living here on the property. And, you know, the first couple of days was like shock. I think the whole world was in shock that this was actually happening after all this time. And then it just, like, it became unreal when we looked around and you read the news and you realize that nobody's coming to help. I've said it in videos before, I'm not one of those people that just feels like America needs to swoop in and save every country all the time. But to be in the country that nobody is coming to save, that everybody's just kind of watching to see what happens. I mean, because now we know that everybody expected Kyiv to fall, you know, for Ukraine to fall within 2 to 3 days. Nobody was coming to help. And it just felt like so vulnerable, so like shocking that the world was really just like, you know, you're really just going to stand by and watch this happen. I mean, at that point, there was nobody was thinking that there was any way Ukraine could succeed against Russia. I mean, yesterday was 200 days of war and Ukraine is doing amazing. But back in those days, like, we didn't know what our military was capable of. And we were all shocked that nobody was coming to help. It was crazy. I think February 27th, people were kind of starting to snap out of it. Ukrainians are a very like communal-minded people, not so individualistic like the West. So once everybody kind of snapped out of their shock, everybody was rushing in to help. You know, every neighborhood, every village, the men are building these barricades. We still have one. From our street is right off of the highway. And so in between the highway, and our street, there's a barricade that you have to go through to get to, you know, further down our street. So men, you know, all kinds of neighbors are building barricades. Our guides were out helping. And then the old grandmas are cooking soup for the men that are building the barricade. There are people lined up, you know, all down the street to sign up to volunteer to be in the military. Ukrainians were mobilizing, and it was a really incredible sight to see. March 1st, I think, was the realization that this is not stopping. I mean, there were more explosions throughout the city. Grant arrived that day. He ended up flying into Poland with a Ukrainian guide that we knew that was coming back from the US to Ukraine to help his people. Him and Grant flew to Poland and then by land made it to us. That was a big sign, like a really great sign to our team, just of his commitment. It was a big encouragement, like, okay, when there's a fire, everybody runs away. That's the normal human response. A fine, expected and acceptable response. But Grant was running to the fire. And, you know, now that he was with us during that time here in Ukraine, like in those early days, and then he was a refugee with us in Germany. And man, it's just been so important that he's been with us during this time. I just think about, like, if he would have waited to come to us now, all that he would have missed of our process and our history through this war. I mean, it's really important that he's been with us. Plus, of course, he's been a huge help. But he arrived that day on March 1st. And that day, I remember we realized that the Russians were, this was not going to be just political, that they were really targeting civilians. You know, we've seen over time that they have wanted this to be a genocide. I don't know why we were surprised, because if you look through history, like, this isn't the first time that Russians have tried to destroy Ukraine, Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian people. There's been times in history when Ukrainian language was outlawed, like you could be killed for speaking the language of Ukrainian. There's the Holodomor, the forced famine from Stalin, where he tried to and succeeded in killing millions and millions of Ukrainian citizens. The USSR, when Ukraine wasn't allowed to be its own country, but it became a part of the Soviet Union. I don't know why we were surprised. I don't know why we thought that this was just going to be political and that they wouldn't try to wipe out Ukrainians. But it became evident in those first few days that they were targeting schools, they were targeting hospitals, they were targeting city centers. It was very shocking. They were trying to terrorize the people, and let me tell you, it was working. So that night of March 1st, there was a huge explosion, a huge bombing in the end of the city closest to our village. I mean, it ended up blowing out all the windows of the maternity hospital where our Evie was born. But that was the first huge explosion that really shook our house. You know, our house and our village, they're right in the flight path of missiles, bombers that are coming from Belarus. Which, you know, Russia has sent a lot through Belarus, and we could hear often, you know, jets, the whistling like of missiles going overhead. It was really scary, and I remember that night of March 1st, there was this huge explosion, and you know, we don't have a bomb shelter, so we're all just crowding into our hallway downstairs. And our two older girls, they were just screaming. I mean, they were just standing, just screaming and screaming and screaming. The boys were in shock. I remember Seth, he was just like, he's our 12-year-old. I'm afraid, I'm afraid, I'm afraid. And then all of a sudden, he just like snapped himself out of it. Like, okay, tell me what to do. And it was late at night, and the dogs were already upstairs in bed. And so he's like, I'm gonna go get the dogs, and brought them downstairs. And I just, like, it was already very real before that, but I think that was the moment where I realized, like, these decisions that we're making right now, like, these could be life and death, these are life and death decisions. I mean, if we stay right now, like, are we legitimately putting our children's lives at risk? Could our kids die because we're not leaving right now, but we're staying? We hadn't felt like we were supposed to leave, but in that moment, you're just like, what the heck are we doing here? Like, this is insane. This is not a movie. This is not just a little skirmish on a border. They want to kill us. People are dying, and it was crazy. I remember we grabbed all of our mattresses from the upstairs. We put them all over the floor of our downstairs living room. Decided, let's all sleep downstairs. Let's all be together tonight. None of the kids wanted to be away from us. Grant was like, I think this is like his first night there. He's like, do I need to sleep downstairs? We're like, yes. I don't want anybody worrying about Grant upstairs. Get your mattress and get down here. It was, yeah. And my mom, earlier that day, she had sent us a voice message of her reading out loud Psalm 91. And so we just turned out the lights, you know, everybody's laying on their mattress on the floor, and we just played her message a couple times in a row. Just her reading Psalm 91 about God's protection over us. And it was such a precious memory. And it was a terrible night, but I'll never forget that memory. The preciousness of that, how her voice, it just was soothing. But the words that she was speaking, like the words from the Bible have never been more real to me than they were in that moment. It was really powerful. March 2nd, we still were resolved to stay. Everything seems better during the day. I think that's how it was those early days. When during the day, there's tons of people around and you're busy and you still have joyful moments with the kids or with the boys. I mean, everybody we loved is all here right together. So there's those joyful moments also with the tension. But then you feel great during the day. And then as the sun goes down and you hear the airplanes overhead, you're like, why did we stay again? What are we doing here again? But really, still we were very overwhelmed by the thought of trying to leave. I mean, where were we going to go? Yes, we could go to our friends in Germany, but taking our guys anywhere is a huge undertaking. We want to take our guys, our boys, to Kyiv for an outing. It's 2 hours away. It's a massive undertaking. So the thought of taking them all the way across Europe, living with them in a, we don't know what we're going to, living with them in a totally unfamiliar place, no, thank you. I'm sure we'll be fine. And you're really confident of that in the day. And then in the night, not so much. March 3rd, we woke up feeling energized, okay, we have all these people living in the homestead, but everybody's taken care of. We have everything we need. Now it's time to look past just our own and to who else we might be able to help. We had the social services for our region. Many of the social workers had already fled. This cars that they had used for social services were given to the military. So there's all these families in need that aren't getting they aren't getting the food they need. They aren't getting the check-ins that they need. So Jed was able to meet with social services, offer the uses of our vehicles, and we could be a humanitarian aid hub here. We have the people, we have the resources, we have the space. We had one side of the duplex that there was people living in there, but there was still plenty of space. We joked that the duplex was like Noah's Ark. It was ready right in time for the flood of people. Jed was able to meet with the mayor's office and really arrange for us to be able to distribute humanitarian aid through our local organization here. And that was a really good day of just feeling okay, we got to get our eyes off of ourselves and help other people now. March 4th, we felt more unsure. You guys, it was crazy how quickly, things were changing every minute. The situation was changing every minute, but also our thoughts God, what are you speaking? Were changing every minute. So March 3rd, we feel full of energy. March 4th, we're feeling okay, a little more unsure. President Zelensky gave this speech to the European Parliament, and he said, it was goosebumps, but how many Ukrainian bodies have to explode? How many heads, how many arms, how many legs, how many feet, how many have to explode for you to help us? Just tell me, give me the number required. I'll go out to the battlefield. I'll count the bodies, the exploded bodies, and I'll come back to you and report to you, and we'll wait on you for your help. It was so dire. Kyiv was under attack. We felt like Ukraine had such a small chance of succeeding. It just felt where is everybody? Where is the world? Are you really going to stand by and watch this happening? We started to wonder, do we stay? A big school in the center of our city was bombed and completely destroyed. We were starting to see the signs in our city that there were in other occupied cities of how the Russians would bomb critical infrastructures in the city centers, and then they would bring in their troops, and the troops were close to our city. It felt impossible to think of leaving, but it also felt how can we stay? The tensions were building here on the homestead. And we had to really think about our boys. They're not able to verbalize to us their wishes. They couldn't tell us their feelings. My kids could scream and cry or talk or wonder or ask questions. And the boys, they can't do any of that. All they can do is read our body language, which was intense. They saw that people were crying. People were worried. They heard those massive explosions. They felt the house shake. It felt like it started to feel really wrong to keep them in this unsafe situation when they couldn't escape for themselves. They couldn't make that choice for themselves. They were relying on us. At the same time, the shelves at the stores were more empty. There were some concerns about food supply. The Russians were attacking Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Russia was invading and striking. That is like 200 kilometers from us, so like 120 miles from us. Another thing that would mess with your head is that we were getting these daily emails from the Department of State, like urging all US citizens to leave. And they were getting more and more urgent, these emails. Please tell us if you're still here. Please tell us if you're still in Ukraine. The embassy had evacuated a long, long time ago. Just letting us know that if you decide to stay in Ukraine, the US military is not going to help you. The US government is not going to step in. Basically, like, you're on your own. I remember the evening of March 3rd or 4th, I was putting Evie to bed, our 4-year-old, and I was just laying next to her in the quiet, and my phone rang. And it wasn't a Ukrainian number. It was an American number. Nobody calls my phone number from the US. Like, if anybody calls me, it's family or friends through Telegram or through FaceTime. It's not a US number calling my phone number, and it was like an 800 number. So I answered it, and I hear this voice. Hello, is this Kimberly Johnson? Yes, this is me. This is so-and-so from the Department of State, and we need to know, are you still in Ukraine? Yes, we're here. How many American citizens are there? I'm like, 8 of us, 9 of us. Are there children? Yes, my children are here. Ma'am, you need to leave right now. And you need to leave. This is very important. This is very serious. The US military is not coming to help you. The US government is not coming to help you. Ma'am, you need to get out now before it's too late. So how do you think it feels to get a phone call like that and then to just be like, well, gulp, thank you for your concern, but I think we're just gonna stay. Like, what kind of parent am I? What kind of person am I? What the heck are we doing? That was a crazy moment. I'm not gonna forget that one. I'm not gonna forget that one and how it felt to answer like that. So every day, either in the morning or in the evening, we were having meetings with all the people that were living here on the homestead, with our team and all the people. And that night, March 4th, it felt different. There were so many tears. The bombing of the school was a big deal. Tensions were rising. And in that meeting, just through prayer and discussion, we all knew the thing that we didn't want to say out loud, that we needed to leave. For our boys, for our kids. We're not an operation that moves quickly. Russian troops were getting quite close, and we can't just hop in a car and go. We were slow. Our guys can't be rushed. And it just felt like the time had come. It wasn't safe for us to be here anymore. I've never cried so much in my entire life. Not sure I ever will again. Just so many emotions. We didn't know what we were going to be coming back to. We didn't know how long we were going to be gone. We didn't really know the circumstances that awaited us. We didn't know if we were going to come back to our home. The guys on our team were not allowed to cross the border with us. Even now, men ages 18 through 60 are not allowed to leave Ukraine except under special circumstances, and none of our guys fit those circumstances. So we knew we were leaving team members behind. And I mean, we just never thought we would leave. It was such an enormous decision. And just to leave your home, leave everything behind, it was terrible. It was really terrible. I mean, we just wrestled so much with that. And the YouTube video of me saying that we're leaving, it has like 20,000 views, which for us is a lot. You guys, I look like a train wreck. Huge bags under my eyes. We'd been crying so much. We'd been sleeping not a lot. You felt like we're so privileged to be able to leave. There's so many people that don't want to leave, okay, but there's so many people that can't leave. We can't bring them all with us. Felt guilty about leaving Ukraine in her time of need. But our mission is to give hope, love, and dignity to people with disabilities in Ukraine. But our whole point is to care for the vulnerable. And it felt wrong to leave our boys at Romaniev, but actually they were safer probably than any of us because they're just out really like in the middle of nowhere. But you know, our first responsibility is to our children and to the boys that are in our care. We had to get them out. So on March 5th, we left. There were about 40 of us. Our family, our boys, all the girls on our team except for one, some family members of our team members, some other moms with sons with disabilities and their family members. One of our team members, Nina, she chose to stay in Ukraine because her husband was fighting at the front and her mom is elderly and she felt like she couldn't travel. So we took her teenage kids and her son that has pretty significant disabilities. So there was about 40 of us. I remember the night before we left, we had made the decision to leave. And then that night of March 4th, the night before we left, at about 11:30 at night, there was the most massive explosion that we had heard to date. It shook the houses. The car alarms were going off. The whole sky was orange. We're just like, yeah, yep, this is time. It's time. We don't need to be doing this anymore. And I remember our Hava was sitting on the couch and she was just sobbing. And I'm like, honey, talk to me. Like, what are these tears? Is it mostly you're afraid? Is it mostly you're sad? Is it mostly you're worried? Like, what are the main, like, what's the main thing right now? And she's like, man, she's wise. But he was like, I'm just realizing, Mom, that our lives are never going to be the same anymore. And I think that's what we were all mourning more than anything. Like, yes, we were afraid. But the biggest emotion was just realizing like this huge massive change of like, there's before February 24th, 2022, and there's after. We'll never be the same people we were before. We'll never be the same people that we were before. We'll never take for granted feeling safe. We'll never hear an airplane overhead the same way. We'll never see Russia the same way. We'll never feel the same way here in Ukraine. We love Ukraine more, that's for sure, than we did before February 24th. But it's like we were children and now we've had to grow up. Yeah, none of us will ever be the same. War changes people for the good and for the bad. And I think that was something that we were all really mourning, and Hava knew how to put it into words. So on March 5th, we loaded up, and about 9 in the morning, we said goodbye to our animals, and we drove away from our home, not knowing what we would come back to. It was probably the worst day of our lives, but if that is the worst day of our lives, then we have fared much better than millions of Ukrainians. We were very, very privileged to leave, and we were very privileged to be able to come back. In the next podcast episode, I'm going to talk about our journey to Germany, the border crossings, and the travel. Guys, that was insane. Legitimately, that was insane. I never want to do that situation again. Please God, I never want to do that again. But the whole evacuation, I'm going to share that story with you because there's a lot of really interesting things about that. I just have to say before I close this out, how thankful I am to all of you for being there with us along the journey. Your prayers and your support, your financial support, I can't even tell you, we were inundated, flooded with support, with encouragement, with comments, with prayers, with scripture, like in the time when the war first started, all the way till we got to Germany, during our time in Germany. Like, people would ask, how can we help? And we would just say, pray and give money. And it felt so lame to say those things, but that's really the only way that you could help us. And you did, like, so much. We really have realized just over the past couple months or so how much your prayers carried us through this incredibly difficult time. There's no way that I could reply and respond to all of you, but every single message and comment, we treasured all of them. I mean, they just carried us. It just, to know that we weren't alone, to know that we were in your thoughts, in your prayers, that you were interceding for us. And then the money, I mean, the thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that you guys gave. I can't even tell you what it means to live through this most difficult time in our lives, but not to 1 second wonder how we were going to be able to provide for our team and for our guys. Not for 1 second to wonder how we were going to be able to afford to help other people outside of our group. We have never had to worry about money one single time during this war. And like, guys, it's incredible. We're so thankful. So yeah, please know that from the bottom of our hearts. If you want to go back and check out any of the YouTube videos that we made during this time that I just shared about, or during our time in Germany, or that I'm still making now, you can go to YouTube and check out Wide Awake International. If you want to sign up for our newsletter, where I still do weekly updates, and I probably will forever, I will put the link to that in our show notes, just so that you know how to stay connected with us now on the journey. So thanks for joining. I hope that this has been enjoyable and that it's helped you to understand a bit more of our story, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.